is considered to be one of the greatest writers of our generation. He's written many graphic novels. His most critically acclaimed are V for Vendetta, Batman the Killing Joke, and Watchmen. These novels have aged very well. They are classics, and they are usually recommended by fans for new comic book readers. So if you're looking for new comic books to read and you don't know where to start with Alan Moore's novels. Watchmen was released in 1984. The time period of this story is based from the 1960s to the 1980s. Watchmen is the name for a league of heroes in a United States of America. Alan Moore's idea was to create something different from the all-good superhero cliche. A more realistic view of how superheroes would be like if they existed and how they would impact our society. The Watchmen members are Silk Spectre, the Night Owl, Ozymandias, the Comedian, Rorschach, and Dr. Manhattan. Apart from Dr. Manhattan, none of them have any superpowers aside from being highly skilled fighters. This is the time period that America was involved in wars. You had the Vietnam War and the Cold War, and those real-life events are adapted into this story. We see that the Watchmen played a big part in historic events. In this fictional universe, America won the Vietnam War with the help of Dr. Manhattan. He has the power to manipulate matter, so he can create and destroy anything and everything. He can't time travel, but he can observe the past, the present, and the future. He can grow and shrink to any size. He can teleport to anywhere in the universe. He also has the power to duplicate himself. In the battlefield, he completely disintegrated the Vietnamese soldiers. So America, having Dr. Manhattan as their asset, gave them the advantage. It was heavily implied that the comedian was the one who assassinated President John F. Kennedy. The rise of Watchmen had a lot of complications. The public did not trust them. They wouldn't just capture criminals in the streets, they would kill. They used their knowledge and skills to do whatever they wanted. There were no rules to keep the Watchmen in check. The public just saw them as crazy people in costumes. This caused many riots across the nation. The public did not want them. This caught the attention of the government, who then passed on the Keene Act. The Keene Act legislation made vigilantism illegal. It is only legal if you work directly for the government. Any person caught doing crime fighting outside of the government is declared an outlaw. With this new law put in place, the Watchmen retire from their vigilante activities. They all move on with their lives and everything seems normal until one of their own is killed. The story begins with this murder mystery. It's revealed that the one that was killed was the comedian. His body was found on the pavement outside of an apartment building. The evidence indicates that he was thrown off his apartment window. The police come to the conclusion that he was murdered. Rorschach doesn't think that the comedian was the only target. He believes that someone is hunting down vigilantes. He breaks into the comedian's apartment to investigate the crime scene. And all of this is going on during the Cold War. Russia had just invaded Afghanistan, and this causes fear amongst Americans, because this could lead to a World War III. And tensions between America and Russia are only getting worse. The world is on the brink of a nuclear war. We learn that one of the Watchmen members, Ozymandias, has a plan to end the war. His plan is to stage an alien invasion. If all the governments around the world believe that the planet was attacked by aliens, they would unite together and end the war. Ozymandias is going to do this by triggering a bomb in New York City, and make it look like it was an alien invasion. But Ozymandias knows that if the other Watchmen members find out about his plan, they will try to stop him, so he plots to get rid of them. It's revealed that he was the one that killed the comedian. The comedian found out about his plan, so in order to keep his mouth shut, he had to kill him. He hires assassins to kill Silk Spectre and the Night Owl. He frames Rorschach for murder, which gets him sent to prison. Finally, he needed to get rid of Dr. Manhattan. This was not an easy task, but Ozymandias is the smartest man in the world. He uses advanced science and funds from his company to create an interference that would block Dr. Manhattan's vision of the future. This way he wouldn't know what Ozymandias was doing. With all the Watchmen out of his way, he was free to carry out his schemes. However, the Watchmen managed to escape his traps. They confront him, but by the time they find out about what he's doing, it's too late. He triggers the bomb in New York, killing half of the population in the city. Ozymandias made it look like it was an alien invasion. The government believes that it was. The world shows solidarity for America. All the governments around the world unite together. The Watchmen come to the realization that Ozymandias was right. He did save humanity from a nuclear extinction. They don't agree with what he did, but if the world finds out about the truth, that Ozymandias was the one that triggered the bomb in New York, it could cause another war. They choose to stay silent. However, Rorschach does not compromise. He believes that the public deserve to know the truth. Dr. Manhattan tells Rorschach that he can't let him tell the truth. And Rorschach tells Dr. Manhattan that the only way he can stop him is if he kills him. Dr. Manhattan does not hesitate. He kills Rorschach by disintegrating his body. So that's an overview of the plot. As the story evolves, we get the characters' development in a lot of depth, and the author expresses his philosophy through those characters. We see these heroes doing very unheroic things. Rorschach is the first character that we are introduced to. His name is Walter Kovacs. He is presented as someone who is alone and introverted. He had a very unhappy childhood. His mother was a prostitute. She was physically and emotionally abusive to him, and he was often bullied by other kids. Growing up in that toxic environment caused him severe psychological damage. As a child, he already had shown thirst for violence. As he gets older, he sees the world for what it is, and he hates it, so he becomes a vigilante. He has shown signs that he is a sociopath, but he does still have some morals and rules that he lives by. He carries a journal with him, and in this journal, he writes down his thoughts and feelings. He expresses his disgust with New York City, the fornication, the drugs, and the crime. He wears a mask to hide his face at all times. We barely see him without it. He has become very attached to this mask to the point that he considers it to be his real face. The comedian is dead in the present, so we only learn about him through the character's thoughts and memories. It's clear that the comedian wasn't a good person. He was a member of another league of heroes called the Minutemen. The Minutemen were around in the 1940s, so before the Watchmen existed. He later joined the Watchmen and continued to work for the government. He didn't take life seriously. He navigated through life as if everything was a joke, which is why they called him the comedian. Because of this, he did horrific things to people without any remorse, because he believed that life had no meaning. He was escorted to Vietnam during the war with Dr. Manhattan, and in there he impregnates a Vietnamese woman. When she demands that he provides for their unborn baby, he kills her just so he doesn't have to deal with her. During the riots, the comedian and the night owl arrive at the scene to get people off the streets and maintain order. He doesn't hesitate to shoot any civilian standing in his way. We find out that he was hired as an assassin to kill John F. Kennedy. So yeah, not a hero. Laurie Drospexik takes on the persona of Silk Spectre. She is the daughter of Sally Drospexik. Sally is a former vigilante. She was also a member of the Minutemen with the comedian. The comedian once tried to rape Laurie's mother. For this reason, Laurie always hated him. She shows no sympathy for the comedian's death. Laurie is dissatisfied with her life. She never really wanted to live her life as a vigilante. Her mother pushed her towards that lifestyle. As a child, her mother forced her to train constantly and pressured her to stay in shape. She was living through her daughter. Sally loved the attention she received during her crime-fighting years. She was a beautiful young woman admired by men. But then she realized that her time passed. She got old, so she compensates by molding her daughter to be like she was when she was younger. This has caused Laurie to become a very confused young woman. She's not very sure of herself. And I don't blame her. She's been forced to live through her mother's expectations her entire life. And things only got worse for her when she found out that the comedian was in fact her real father. Sally explains to her that even after he almost raped her, she couldn't bring herself to hate him. In their own twisted way, they loved each other. Not long after the incident, they slept together and she got pregnant with Laurie. Laurie is shocked to find out that the man that she hated her entire life was her father. She is upset at first, but then she learns to accept it. Daniel Dreiberg takes on the persona of the Night Owl. He is Rorschach's only friend. Rorschach is a very unlikable person. He has poor social skills and bad personal hygiene. Laurie has openly said that she doesn't like the way he smells. Everyone thinks he's a creepy guy, but Daniel doesn't judge him negatively. He treats him like a human being. He's probably the only person in the world that cares about Rorschach. Him and Laurie get into a relationship. Laurie was with Dr. Manhattan in the beginning, but that relationship turned sour. She then befriends Daniel and they build a very strong bond together. Dr. Manhattan wasn't born with these powers. His real name is Jonathan Osterman, and he worked as a nuclear physicist. One day he accidentally locked himself inside an experiment room that was radioactive. His team were running experiments without knowing that he was trapped inside, but by the time they realized, it was too late. The radiation completely disintegrated his body. Shockingly, this did not kill him. Instead, his body went through a transformation. It gave him the powers to manipulate matter, telekinesis, teleportation, and to see the future, essentially making him a living god. His powers caused the world to fear him. With his help, America became the most powerful nation in the world. Because of his powers, he became more disconnected from humanity. He doesn't care much for human life, not because he's spiteful or evil. Humans are just simply insignificant to him. He has walked on the surface of the sun. He has seen events so tiny that they could hardly be said to have occurred at all. He has the power to travel to distant galaxies in the entire universe. Why would he concern himself with planet Earth? This is the main reason why him and Laurie broke up. Laurie noticed that he was so out of touch with humanity that he could no longer emotionally connect with her. Daniel was a far better match for her. Finally, we have Ozymandias. He's quite a complex character. His name is Adrian Veidt. From a young age, he demonstrated great intelligence. His IQ is so high, he's estimated to be the world's smartest man. I mean, he was smart enough to trick Dr. Manhattan himself. Because of his intelligence, he couldn't relate to other people. He had drive and determination. He wanted to prove to himself that he could be better. When his parents died, they left him a lot of money. But he wanted to prove to himself that he could be successful without the help of his parents. So he gave away all of his inheritance to charity and worked hard to build an empire starting from nothing. He was successful. He built a $1 billion company starting from the ground up. He did that just to prove how smart he is. He always had a vision of what an ideal world should be. He later joined the Watchmen because he wanted to make the world a better place. He believed in justice. But then he realized that crime fighting wasn't making a difference. It wasn't going to save the world from World War III. So he goes rogue and comes up with his own plan. He doesn't find any role models that measure up to his intelligence. So he studies history and he becomes very fascinated with ancient Greek culture, which is why he dresses in Greek style. He also becomes very fascinated with ancient Egyptian culture. He learns about Alexander of Macedonia and Ramses II. These two historic figures become his idols, and he uses their philosophies as inspiration for his great plan. He believed that his plan would work. After all, he did plan to build an empire from nothing, and he was successful. This boosted his ego. He believed he could achieve anything. This is a person with severe superiority complex. You can see in the manner that he carries himself with pride and vanity. He believes himself to be superior to everyone else. Ozymandias sees himself creating a better future for humanity. In order to create a new world, you must destroy the old one. He believes that his vision of an ideal world is right, and he was willing to achieve it at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing millions of innocent lives. When the Watchmen find out about his plan, he tells them that their heroic attempts to do justice didn't change anything. All they did was fail to stop him from saving Earth. In his own words, human nature is evil, and the only way they learn is if they are punished. Ozymandias understood that the only way humans will stop fighting each other is if they are faced with a common enemy. If he could make the world believe that they were attacked by an alien force, they would unite together to fight against the common enemy. In the end, his plan did prevent World War III. He bombed New York City, framed it as an alien invasion. As a result, the world united together. He just murdered millions of people. He committed a horrific crime, but it did help end the war. So, was he really insane, or was the sacrifice necessary? The Watchmen decide to keep this a secret, except for Rorschach. Dr. Manhattan kills him to stop him from telling the truth to the public. In the end, Ozymandias is not sure whether he did the right thing. Dr. Manhattan no longer wants to concern himself with human affairs. He leaves Earth for another galaxy. The Watchmen novels serves as a ridicule on the mainstream idea of superheroes. The Watchmen creator, Alan Moore, has very strong opinions about superheroes in pop culture. He has said that he doesn't like the way people worship superheroes and put them on pedestals expecting them to be good all the time. He thinks it's unrealistic that if someone was to possess that kind of power, that they would only use it for good. He says that traditional superheroes were created to appeal to the imagination of children, so he created Watchmen with a more realistic view of superheroes. In the novels, they are never called superheroes. They are labeled as costumed adventurers. We see that most of them don't become heroes because they want to do good. Most of them do it because it makes them famous or it gives them a job to do. And some of them just need an excuse to unleash their violent rages. Just look at real life history. Most world leaders were tyrants. Humans are selfish. If someone was to possess that kind of power, they most likely would have used it for their own selfish gain. The Watchmen are heroes who are not very heroic, but they are not shown to be just pure evil. The comedian was not an honorable man, but he does redeem himself in the end when he finds out that millions of people in New York were going to be murdered. Even Ozymandias didn't expect him to have a change of heart, which is essentially why he killed him. Rorschach is a violent sociopath, but he does care about protecting the innocent. Ozymandias massacred half of the population in New York City, making him a serial killer. In our eyes, he's a villain, but villains don't see themselves as the bad guy. He didn't kill with malicious intent. All of his killings were calculative. He only killed if it served his goals. You could say he's a psychopath. Being the smartest man in the world with tremendous wealth has made him fall out of touch with humanity. His struggle to form human connections has led him to live a solitary life. Perhaps his loneliness drove him to madness. Or it could be that he's perfectly sane and he just saw those people as beneath him and therefore he didn't value their lives. He's willing to crush over everyone to achieve his goals. Alan Moore doesn't portray the Watchmen as pristine, all-righteous heroes, but rather as three-dimensional, complex characters. We see that they are capable of doing great good and great evil because they are not perfect superheroes. They are human beings with perfections and flaws. Alan Moore raises the question, if superheroes existed, would we really want them to? The answer is most likely no. If they did exist, they would have total control of our society. They would have the power to decide who lives and who dies. We wouldn't love them, we would fear them. Ozymandias is a great example. He became so obsessed with the idea of a utopia. With his high intelligence, power and influence, he saw himself as a god and that he must punish humanity for their sins. He's not a hero, he's a tyrant. If superheroes were real, it wouldn't be someone like Superman. Most likely be someone like Ozymandias. There are a lot of symbolic references throughout the story. One good example is, in the end, when Rorschach is about to die, the patterns in his mask resemble the shadow of Daniel and Laurie making love by the swimming pool, making every moment in the story interconnected. All walks of life, from the average citizen in New York to America's heroes and politicians in power, with all their separate lives and different stories, they are all connected with each other. Another good example is how the books are structured. The Watchmen novels consist of 12 issues, and this was done on purpose. The Doomsday Clock is very symbolic to this story. It exists in real life, and scientists use it to predict how close humanity is to extinction. Once it reaches 12 o'clock, it means that we have reached the end. So, in events of war, a global pandemic, or climate change, we get closer to 12 o'clock. The story is split into 12 parts, representing the 12 hours in the clock. So each book you read is 1 hour closer to doomsday. And it's in the final book, in the 12th hour of the clock, where Ozymandias triggers the bomb in New York. This has great effect on the reader. It builds up tension as the story moves forward. The symbolism is very clever and very well thought out. Director Zack Snyder adapted the Watchmen novels into live action. The movie was released in 2009. I think that this live action adaptation is just as good as the novels. There are some details from the novels that they didn't include in the film, but that is to be expected. The novels consist of 12 books. It would be impossible to fit it all in a 2-hour movie. I think Zack Snyder had a good vision for this. The scenes were shot in the exact same way that they were drawn in the comic books. Watchmen has had quite a lot of influence in modern superhero culture. Alan Moore gave us a different perspective. He changed the way we think about superheroes. Watchmen is a very cleverly written story. It teaches us about the complexity in human nature. I highly recommend that you read the novels, and I also recommend the movie. Thank you for watching.